welcome to Collapse Astrology. Welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Hummingbird, and in today's video, I'm just here to drop in with some quick thoughts on how we can work with the energy of this Mars retrograde that we are currently right in the middle of. You might have noticed that I have a new Collapse Astrology logo, which I am excited about, and a few of you also might have noticed that I kind of dropped off the face of the earth, which I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of my style, especially during a Mars retrograde. But I want to let anyone who's paying attention know that this YouTube channel is a long-term project for me, and I am very dedicated to it over the long run. My Mars is at 0 degrees of Taurus, so really the only way that I can accomplish anything is a super slow, long-term planning, one foot in front of the other, day by day kind of approach. But I've got a lot of ideas and plans for this channel, and I just really hope that I start getting brave enough to go live and interact and do more of a news-like coverage of the astrology, which is really what I've been wanting to do for years. But honestly, my Mercury in Aries makes me nervous, and these scripted and edited videos feel a lot more comfortable for me to do right now. So anyway, I'm just taking a Mars and Taurus approach to it, but I promise that I will be dependable in the long run with this kind of astrological content. Okay, so if you have also dropped off in some way, if you're feeling like a withdrawal of your energy, or like you've lost your motivation or your sense of purpose, your fight is just kind of depressed, that is a very normal symptom of Mars being retrograde. Unless you have a natal Mars retrograde, which is only about 7% of people, this is going to be a time when your normal ways of getting things done, making things happen, these kind of phrases that we use, they often feel like they short circuit, like they stop working, like the way that we usually do things just isn't cutting it at this time, and it can feel really, really hard to make externalized progress. Now, if you do have a natal Mars retrograde, you might feel like that most of the time, like society's way of working and manifesting and achieving goals, etc., just doesn't work for you, and you may have had to just figure out your own more intuitive, maybe less direct way of getting to where you want to go in life. And you might actually feel more normal and more relaxed when Mars is retrograde by transit. But for most of us, this can be a pretty edgy, pretty confusing time. So I want to share a few ways to work with this energy so that we are not pushing against the currents of what the cosmos is bringing in for us. So first, let's just go over the basics of the transit. So here are a bunch of important dates. The exact date of the retrograde is between December 6th, 2024 and February 23rd, 2025. And it's between 6 degrees of Leo and 17 degrees of Cancer. And you can see the dates for the shadows here, as well as some other important dates. So Mars goes back and forth between Leo and Cancer during the retrograde. It backs up into Cancer on January 6th, comes back into Leo not until April 18th after the retrograde is over. There's also a couple important oppositions. So Mars is opposing Pluto during this retrograde, which is a pretty intense transit, and that's on January 3rd. And then there's also Mars opposite the Sun, which always happens during Mars retrograde, and it is the midpoint of the retrograde, and it can represent kind of like a big starting over. It's kind of like the new moon of the Mars cycle. And so we're working with two different signs, Leo and Cancer. And like all signs that are next to each other, they have a lot of very different characteristics and needs. So Leo is a fire sign. It's full of passion and vitality and spontaneity. It's fun and inspirational. And Mars here is very energetic and motivated. It does also have a shadow side of pride and selfishness and aggression, being overly competitive, that kind of thing. So that's what we're working with for the first part of the retrograde. And as I'm recording, we're right at the end of this Leonian phase, and Mars is about to drop back into Cancer, which happens on January 6th. So this is a very different energy with very different themes and ways of operating. Technically, Mars is in detriment in Cancer. And I always like to recommend not to take dignity super seriously. Definitely don't let it develop a disempowering story about one of your natal placements. But it also can be helpful information in understanding how a planet functions and which landscapes are most optimized for its natural way of being. So people with Mars in Cancer, sometimes they get a bad reputation for being lazy, and this is a placement where even if your Mars is not retrograde natally, you're probably going to operate differently from the rest of the world. You might be a real homebody. You might need to choose your action plan based more on your heart and your emotions than on logic and cold calculations. And you may feel like your warrior self is most lit up when something vulnerable needs protection. So Mars in Cancer can feel very out of place in capitalist settings where the goals are always expansion and growth as opposed to nurturing and safety and stability. So for all of us, moving into this phase of the retrograde, which lasts for about 3 months because Mars doesn't re-enter Leo until April, we can expect to be working with this unusual, quote-unquote, debilitated Mars. And the way that I like to understand that is that each planet has landscapes that they are better suited for, just the way some of us are mountain people and some of us are beach people, some of us are city people, some of us are rural people. And we don't always get exactly what we want in life, right? You may be more of a country person, but you may live in the city because your partner has a good job there, or there's a good school for your kids there, and you may, learn to balance that by spending your weekends in nature. That kind of thing, I think, is also how we can work with natal placements or transits like this where a planet is not in its optimized landscape. So Mars, it's not completely at home in Cancer. You could say Mars is not a Cancer person because Mars' ideal way of functioning is very immediate and very individualistic. Surrender is not really in Mars' wheelhouse, just naturally. But giving, feeling, intuiting, trusting, loving, empathizing, this is what Cancer is all about. And all of that does require surrender. Mars in Cancer feels most gratified when it's helping, nourishing, protecting, and it's much more tuned into qualitative results than quantitative ones. So you can see how it might not fit in with the capitalist rush towards progress and growth. And I would say in general, in Cancer, Mars can feel a little bit confused. It can take some delicacy to find your way. So we might just all be feeling a little out of sorts in this particular way. We might feel very tired, like we just need a lot of rest. We might notice a lot of fluctuation in our emotions and in the way that that corresponds to our motivation. Some of the shadows here are moodiness, self-doubt or like low self-esteem, emotional eating, overgiving, and having a poor gauge on your own emotional resourcing. If you have children, that's going to be another very important layer of this retrograde. What is your role as a parent? What does the ideal type of nurturing look like? How do you create a safe and nurturing home space without being overprotective? Mars in Cancer can definitely have a mama bear type of energy, and that's a superpower. If you are lucky enough to be loved by someone with Mars in Cancer, they're very loyal. They'll always be there when you're in need. But especially during the retrograde, because the invitation from the universe is to look inward, the transit might bring awareness for all of us to where we are overprotective or where we maybe don't have full consciousness around our own mama bear nature. Whether or not that has to do with kids in your life or your home space or just anything else that you consider very precious. In general, Mars retrograde is a really great time for doing inner excavation around what your own deepest desires really are. It's definitely not a question that we ask ourselves often enough because there's so much external input around what we should desire, and it takes real intention and effort to get in touch with what it is that we really truly want. I also feel like this question is particularly potent at this time in history, when I know for so many people the old capitalist dreams are collapsing. And that means something different to everyone, but Capitalism is a goose chase. The American dream is obviously now more of a goose chase than ever. And a lot of people are waking up to that. A lot of those bigger, longer term changes are described by the outer planet transits. But Mars retrograde makes it more acute, more personal, a much more intimate experience of that catching up to reality process. And especially in this post-election moment, people are asking how we got here, what we've been doing that has now allowed the full weight of this broken system to be collapsing in on us. So I think that during the retrograde, this process is moving a lot faster for a lot of people. The veil is being ripped from our eyes even more than it was before. And big questions can be coming up about what you thought you wanted in life, how you thought you were going to get there, what your values and priorities really are. And to go even deeper, Mars is going to be in Cancer during Trump's inauguration and for a long time after. And I just want to name that this is prime astrological conditions for depression, for a nervous system shutdown or a freeze response. First of all, if you're in the northern hemisphere, of course, it's winter, which is generally hard for a lot of people in terms of mental health. And Mars in Cancer, I don't know if I would say that it's prone to depression, but it doesn't feel good if it has to be out of the house too much, if it's getting stretched and not getting enough time to recharge. And also Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon has a lot to do with the nervous system and with our survival and threat responses. Technically, in medical astrology, the nervous system is ruled by Mercury, but the moon and its themes of safety and shelter and basic needs being met really overlap with the nervous system, so the two are definitely related. And something that is very, very normal is having your nervous system go into a freeze response when external events are very dark and when you feel powerless to do anything about them. That's when evolutionarily our survival response tells us to play dead. But in a world where you have to get up and go to work every day, trying to do that while you're in a freeze response is like being in first gear and like flooring the gas pedal, you know what I mean? So assuming that all goes as planned with Trump's inauguration, we're going to see his people taking office and we're going to see them start to do really destructive things to the government. And even if Mars wasn't retrograde, obviously that would be hard to stomach. But with this retrograde, with Mars in Cancer, I just think that it's very likely that our nervous systems will be trying to protect themselves by moving into that low gear, that dorsal vagal space. So if you find yourself there, have a lot of patience, have a lot of compassion, focus on taking care of yourself in very basic ways, like eating as well as you can, doing gentle movement like walking, and just take as much pressure off of yourself as you can when it comes to achieving goals. And also trust the timing, because in my experience working with the territory of collapse, moving through waves of despair and of this freeze response are part of the process. And the shutdown won't last forever because we actually have inside of ourselves something way stronger and way more resilient and way more eternal than that despair. We have parts of ourselves that are much more resourceful than we even have any idea of. And even when things look dark, those parts of us want to find solutions, but we're never going to find any real grounded solutions without first going through the process of accepting and metabolizing the depressing reality. And that can't happen overnight. The grieving of our old ideas and beliefs and mythologies can't happen overnight. So this is a really good time to give yourself to grief. Give yourself to the care of your own inner child and trust that in time, something that was ruptured will heal and integrate into a new, even deeper faith in humanity and in yourself. Okay, now let's finish up with a few specific recommendations for how to manage this energy and how to get the most out of this transit. So I have 4 specific ones for you. First recommendation is keep your expectations low. on moving your life forward in any big externalized way during the retrograde. That doesn't mean that no one will have a breakthrough during this time, but if you do, it will be the result of work that you have been engaged with long before the retrograde coming back to the surface as Mars dredges it up. Instead, focus on your behind the scenes work, which I'll elaborate on in the next recommendation. If you have deadlines or crucial decisions to make during the retrograde, try to wait at least until after January 15th when Mars goes through that new moon with the sun, and there's kind of a start over that happens around then. Take the pressure off yourself to move any projects forward, especially where there's not already some natural momentum. And especially in the first half of the retrograde, the work is more about compost, clearing, disintegration, and release. All right, second, choose a behind the scenes task to focus on during the retrograde. So by this, I mean, pick a project that doesn't have any immediate external goal, but something that you can be working on in the background of your life during the retrograde. So maybe there is a closet or a basement that really needs to be cleaned out. Maybe you pick up a creative project that you dropped months or years ago and see if you can reconnect with that thread. Maybe you are browsing for a new car that you eventually want to buy, but you're like not taking any action steps towards that yet. It can also be a good time to be allowing yourself to learn something through experience without trying to be super good at it. So as an example, I just got a yoga teacher certification a little while ago, and now I'm kind of subbing classes here and there, and I'm not like charging forward to like make teaching yoga a new part of my life, but it feels like perfect timing with the retrograde to just step in where I'm needed and get the experience and just like kind of passively get in my groove with that practice. Number 3, focus on defense and protection. So an invitation to explore this kind of theme: defense, protection, boundaries, shelter, conservation. Where have you let your guard down? What in your life needs your mama bear energy? How does your inner warrior take care of itself and defend itself? What kind of solid base or root do you need before you can really extend out to the world? And how can you create that? And then finally, recommendation number 4 is rest. Be passive. Follow the Nap Ministry on Instagram and similar accounts to remind yourself of the revolutionary and liberatory nature of rest. Also, maybe there's something in your life that you are not ready to give up on, but you need a little break. Take a little break if you can during this time and see what you learn, see what is revealed to you, and you create that space for yourself about your deeper soul level desires. All right, and I'm about to finish here. I did just want to put the tinfoil hat on for a quick second to mention Mars opposite Pluto on January 3rd. If any craziness is going to go down pre-inauguration, that aspect is the most charged, most intense timing of the retrograde. So I would expect if there is any kind of a culmination, any kind of a climax that's coming, it'll probably happen in the next week or so. But, I'm probably totally wrong about all of that. So just wanted to mention that timing. Now we'll finish. All right, many blessings. I will be back with y'all soon.